imajući u vidu da je naš gost ovde takođe pisac ove knjige, događaj će zapravo biti na engleskom, ukoliko bude bilo nekih problema moći će on međusobno da se prevedemo šta je ko mislio hteo da kaže. Tako da ću sada da se prebacim na engleski. Dear all, thank you for coming this evening. Our guest today is Professor Rajner Citelman, whom I kindly asked to join us here. Professor Citelman has published a book in German, English, and several other languages that is now been translated and published in Serbian by our friends from the Heliks publishing house. The Heliks publishing house is, for the Serbian audience, one of the I think best publishing houses, because they tend to cover the topics that most of the publishing houses in Serbia tend to overlook, which is popular sciences. Unfortunately, economics also tends to be a science, so we are happy to see a new title from the economics section that we will be discussing this evening. Professor Citelman has a very long and fructuous career in Germany. Let's just mention that he has not one but two doctorates, one from history as a historian, but also one from sociology. His main fields of interest have actually been market economy, how it functions, and how is market economy perceived by people in the societies and those entrepreneurs who are building the new ways of doing business in creating new and better services and products. So basically how the people at large perceive the rich people. Apart from his very interesting opus regarding that subject, he also had been writing excessively on the economic system of National Socialism, basically trying to convey the meaning that although economic and social policy in Third Reich were not only something that is created in order to pacify the population and make it a part of the totalitarian state, but that socialist policies in Germany were a part of the wider intellectual movement of the German political elite at that time. Having this said, I would like to ask Professor Citelman to show us one of his presentations regarding the topics that he covered in the book. Afterwards, I will ask him a couple of questions, and then we will open the floor for the audience. Thank you very much.
So, thank you. The only thing I have to correct, 2 PhDs is correct, professor is not correct, but everything else was correct. Thank you for this introduction. Yes, let's speak about capitalism. I know for a lot of people, maybe not for you, but for most of the people, capitalism is a dirty word. And this is not only here in Serbia, but it's in most other countries. And you know, I traveled a lot. Last year I was in 17 countries. This year I will go to 30 countries to speak about capitalism and have almost in every country interviews, TV interviews, and sometimes I have only 30 seconds to explain why I have this t-shirt, not today, but sometimes I love capitalism. And people ask me, and if I have only 20 seconds, I tell them always this story, that before capitalism, 200 years ago, 90% of the worldwide population lived in extreme poverty. And today it's less than 10%. And what is even more important, that half of this reduction happened over the last 40 years. And I think this is such an amazing story that a lot of people, of course, don't know. And what means poverty at this time, 200 years ago? It means something totally different than it is today. Here I have these facts. Even in England and France, that were some of the wealthiest countries at this time, about 20% of the population were not able to work at all because they were too weak even to work, and so they were condemned to a life of begging. This is what poverty meant at this time when I said that so many people lived in extreme poverty. And there's a lot of things that people don't know. For example, if we speak about famines, most people think about Africa, of course, but it's not true. You see, the fact is that 80% of all victims of famines in the 20th century were in the Soviet Union and in Mao's China. And when I give my lectures in other countries, I ask everywhere, whether it's in Asia, Latin America, United States, or here in Europe, I ask everyone, have you heard at school about the biggest socialist experiment in history, Mao's so-called Great Leap Forward that happened in the end of the 50s? Maybe I can ask you as well, who have heard at school about Mao's Great Leap Forward? At school. So no one. So, this is similar in almost every country, whether I speak in Korea, whether I speak in Argentina or wherever, or in Europe, people haven't heard about it. At this time, with this biggest socialist experiment, 45 million people died. 45 million people died between 1958 and 1962. I think people should hear about this at school. But they hear a lot about the so-called evils of capitalism, but they don't hear about poverty, hunger, starvation in socialism. Of course, I know people may agree and say, yes, maybe you're right, but what is with inequality? And I will tell you the story about China, because I was very often in China, and even in my book, there's one chapter written by Chinese economists from Beijing University. And you see here what happened in China. In 1981, 88% of the Chinese population lived in extreme poverty, 88%. Today it's less than 1%. In the same time, the number of billionaires increased. Of course, in Mao's time, there was not a single, maybe Mao was billionaire, I don't know, but there was not a single billionaire. Today you have in China as many billionaires as you have in the United States. And why is this so important? Because the reason for decreasing poverty and increasing the number of wealthy people is the same, economic growth. And it started in China with the economic reforms of Deng Xiaoping in the beginning of the 80s. Of course, China today is not a pure capitalist country. On the contrary, unfortunately, they go more and more back to more state in the last years. But the progress, what happened here, what you see in this graph, started with economic reforms, pro-market reforms. And so you see, the good thing is with capitalism, even you don't need pure capitalism, even some drops of capitalism help to increase the situation of so many people. And this is not only true for China. I show you one graph that is very important for me, because a lot of people believe in this, what I call zero-sum belief. What does it mean, zero-sum belief? It means some people think that rich people, that they become only rich because they take it away from the poor. This is the core belief of all socialists, zero-sum thinking. And you see, this is totally wrong. This is totally nonsense, because here you have the development since 1987. The number of poor people decreased all over the world. the number of rich people increased. If zero-sum thinking would be true, how to explain these numbers and how to explain the numbers that I showed you from China? It's not possible. So zero-sum thinking is absolutely wrong, but it's a core belief from socialists. And if you believe in zero-sum thinking, the consequences, then you say, okay, if the rich people are only rich because they have taken it away from the poor, let's take it away, expropriate rich people or make very high taxes for them to give it back to the poor. But this didn't work. We know it all over the world. This did not work. And for me, inequality is not the topic. Of course, you see, inequality, I had the example from China, is bigger in China today than it was in socialist times. But I found no one in China who told me, oh no, let's go back to Mao's time because we were more equal. I found no one there. We should care about poverty, not about inequality. Inequality, this is something for envious people. There's this guy who has more than I'm envious so. But we should care more about poverty. This is the real problem. The same in Vietnam. Some month ago I was in Vietnam. I don't know whether you heard about it. Vietnam was, even in 1990, the poorest country in the world. They had this terrible war, not only one war, they had several wars. The last war, you know, was with the United States, but before it was with France, and so that this wars. After the war, they had socialism, and socialism destroyed everything that the war had not destroyed, and so they were such a poor country. And then they started 1986 with the so-called Doi Moi reforms, economic reforms, what means allowing private property, more market economy, and now if you are in Vietnam, the situation improved for almost everyone. Before economic reforms, 80% lived in poverty, today it's 5%. And of course, we have some billionaires there, but I found no one in Vietnam who told me, we were more equal, let's go back there to socialist times. And here I have another analysis is by Walter Scheidel, The Great Leveler, a great book. I can recommend it to you. He analyzed throughout the history how inequality was reduced, not in theory and in practice. And what he found out, it was due to 4 reasons. War, for example, First World War, Second World War, and this way the French economist Thomas Piketty is right. These 2 wars were the great levelers, so war reduced inequality, and revolution like Russian Revolution, Chinese Revolution, state failure, system collapse, and plague. So you see, all this, what happened in history, reducing inequality, was combined with force and with bad events. Not so with reducing poverty. Reducing poverty was a peaceful process, and this is a big difference. And another argument against capitalism, especially popular in Germany, where I come from, or with a lot of young people. I don't know how important it is in Serbia for people, but in Germany, it's maybe the most important argument against capitalism. They tell you, okay, capitalism is responsible for environmental destruction and climate change. And they will tell you this is because of private capitalist profit-seeking companies. They are responsible for environmental destruction. But this is not true. I prove in my book with a lot of facts. What you see here, I don't know who of you knows the Index of Economic Freedom from Heritage Foundation. So some of you have heard. For the others, you can Google it. It's free on the internet. It's like 500 pages. You can get it free on the internet. The Index of Economic Freedom. And this is ranking how economically free are different countries. At the top are countries as Singapore, Switzerland, New Zealand, and countries like this. And at the bottom are like North Korea, Venezuela, or Cuba. And then there's another index. I don't know who have heard about this index. This is the Environmental Performance Index by Yale University. Who had heard about this? So this is also, you can get it free on the internet, Environmental Performance Index. And here I compared both of these indexes. And you see, as a result, the economically free countries, so it means the most capitalist countries, they have much better environmental standards than the countries that are economically not free. This is something that a lot of people don't know, and I have here some example. You can compare very easily East and West Germany. East Germany, what was socialist, West Germany, capitalist, and here are the annual per capita CO2 emissions from East and West Germany. And if you adjust it to GDP per capita, they were 3 times higher in East Germany than in West Germany. So, but if capitalism is the reason for environmental destruction, and if private profit-seeking capitalist companies are responsible for environmental destruction, why is that? How to explain that? This was not only with CO2 emissions. You see here airborne pollutants in East and West Germany, like sulfur dioxide. It was even 10 times higher in East Germany if you adjust it to the people who lived there in tons per square kilometer. And then there's this argument, you can hear it very often. Okay, resources are limited on the earth, so unlimited growth is not possible, and this is the reason why we should abolish capitalism. So you can hear it very often, and of course this sounds logical on first glance, that resources are limited and so growth cannot be unlimited. But it's not as easy as it sounds. You see here the iPhone or smartphone, I think almost everyone today has one. Look how many devices these were before and how much resources were wasted for all this. And this is not complete. Someone counted it, I think it's like 36 different devices that you have in this mobile phone. And you needed a lot of more resources. And this is not only with the iPhone. It's also, when I was young, I had a big collection of, maybe the old of you know the old discs. So, and then later I bought the smaller one, the CDs. And today my girlfriend, who is much younger than me, laughs at me if they say, why do you buy CDs? I know no one who does this, because they get it, you know, from the internet, and so they don't need so much resources today. Or with books, I have some thousands of books, I don't know how many, 5,000, 7,000, I haven't counted them. But my father, even in spite of the fact he's now 94 years old, he's much more up to date than me, because he reads everything with his Kindle. So there are not so many resources needed. So the story that growth means always that we need more resources is not true, and I have a lot of facts about this in the book. The most popular argument against capitalism is capitalism means that the rich people rule. And for Germany, where I come from, this is an absolutely stupid idea, because if rich people would rule, the situation in Germany would be much different. We wouldn't have this crazy policy that, for example, Angela Merkel did, first to phase out nuclear power plants, then to phase out coal power plants, forbid fracking, making us dependent on Russian gas, and then in the end wondering where does our energy should come from. No rich people would have done similar things like she did. So for a country as Germany, it's absolutely clear for me that this is a crazy idea. But I take always the best example from anti-capitalists. And the best example that they have is, of course, the United States. And everyone knows that to become president in the United States, you have to raise a lot of funds, hundreds of millions. Otherwise, it's not possible. But even for the United States, it's not so easy to say the rich rule there, and the richest that they decide who will rule. Because if this would be the case, Donald Trump would have never been president of the United States. You see here, I've compared, of course, he raised $600 million from donors, but Hillary Clinton raised twice as much, $1.2 billion. And as of September 2016, not a single Fortune 100 CEO had donated to Trump's campaign. Later, when they saw maybe he can win, of course, they gave something like an insurance in the case he will win. But they didn't do it. It was not their favorite, Donald Trump. And if money would decide who will become president of the United States, this would be the president of the United States, not Joe Biden. This is Michael Bloomberg, one of the richest people in the world. At the time of his campaign, he owned $62 million. Today, it's even more. And he spent $1 billion in 3 months. There was never someone who spent so much money. The result was zero. Not he's president, but Joe Biden, who's much poorer than him. And I have a lot of examples in the book. What I do in the book, I quote especially people who are in general of different opinion than I. For example, here Larry M. Bartels, it's a more left-leaning political scientist in the United States. But he made research about the 16 presidential election campaigns from 1952 to 2012. And I added another election, and the outcome you see here, that there were just 2 out of 17 elections over the past 64 years in which unequal campaign spending was a decisive factor. So who spent more? So you see, this prejudice or this stereotype, the rich rule and who gives most money decides who will be president. Even for the United States, this is wrong. And you find a lot of facts in this book. By the way, I've not written the book to convince anti-capitalists. Why not? Because I know that anti-capitalists will not read books like this. They prefer to read book number 35, Why Capitalism is Evil, than only to touch one book like this. No, I wrote this book for people like you and for people who are maybe more emotionally pro-capitalism, pro-market economy, but they need all the facts, all the arguments. And so if you have a discussion, for example, about one of these topics, even you don't have to read the whole book. If you have a discussion with left-leaning politicians about environmental problems, read chapter 3, then you have all the facts. If you have a discussion about inequality, read chapter 2 of the book, or if you have a discussion about this is the rule, the rich rule, then you can read this chapter here. This is another example in all these books where people tell us something about the rule of the rich, that capitalism means the rule of the rich in the United States. One survey is quoted, and this survey was 10 years ago. It was about the perceived importance of problems facing the United States. And they asked very rich people. And they asked the ranking. Most of them were concerned about budget deficits in the United States. And climate change was a topic where almost none of them was interested in 10 years ago. So if the rich people really would set the political agenda, and if it would be them who decide what politics they made, the opposite happened. You see, at the time of the survey 10 years ago, the budget deficit was 15.6 trillion, and today it's twice as much. So neither Barack Obama, no, not Donald Trump, not Joe Biden did what the rich people wanted, reducing government spending. And here is another argument: capitalism leads to monopolies. You hear it often. By the way, for me, what is really funny, maybe the same guy who criticizes monopolies, half hour later, he will tell you why we should nationalize some of them. But it is not logical. If you are against monopolies and then half hour later you vote for the biggest monopoly that is possible for the state monopoly. No, the real enemy of monopolies is not the state, it's capitalism. And you see it here. Of course, when monopolies are very powerful on the height of their power, like now maybe Google, Amazon, Facebook, companies that are called monopolies sometimes, then everyone thinks they will last forever. But this is not true. If you look in history, all these monopolies were destroyed sooner or later, not by the state. In most cases, no, by competition. Here you see, it's not long ago, 2007, headline in The Guardian, will MySpace ever lose its monopoly? Who knows MySpace here in this room? Okay, so a lot of you haven't heard about it. The younger ones, if I tell them something about MySpace, they don't know what it is. But here you have the headline, will MySpace ever lose its monopoly? Later was Facebook, and then it's Instagram, and then it's TikTok or whatever. Competition is the real enemy of monopolies. The same here. I remember I had this Nokia cell phone. I liked it very, very much. I even bought 5 or 6 of them because I had fear that sometimes you can't buy them. But today I don't have this Nokia. Who has a Nokia today here in the room? Yes, but, and you use it? You still use it, yes?
When I want to be disconnected from the world, yes.
Okay, so when you are disconnected of the world, you use it. But, you see here, this is the headline in Forbes also in 2007. It is 1 billion customers. Can anyone catch the cell phone king? Was the question. So people always think monopolies last forever, as they think today about Google or Amazon. The same here with Xerox. Their market share was 95% in 1972. And today it's less than 2%. Even in the United States, they use, or some people use today, the word Xeroxing to make a photocopy because they had such a big market share. And who destroyed it? The government? No. Capitalism. Capitalism is the biggest enemies of monopolies. Here, Kodak. They had, in the United States, 90% of the US film market, 85% of the US camera market. Later, they underestimated the shift to digital cameras, and then 10 years ago, they filed for bankruptcy. So another example, and in my book, you will find a lot of other examples. So these are only, in my book, I destroy 10 myths about capitalism, but you will find much, much more. These were only some examples, and one of the first people who read the book in Germany, he said, Citelman, me, is a fanatic with facts. And in a way, he's correct, because I like this facts against ideology. Of course, I know you cannot always convince people with facts, but this is the only thing that I have there to give you. And here I have some other facts, and this is a poll. I started in 14 countries, so in the German edition of the book, you have only 14 countries. In the US edition, you have 21 countries. I think in your edition, you have something like 26, but it's an ongoing process. In the meantime, we have done it in 33 different countries. The poll, it's the largest project ever to find out what people all over the world think about capitalism. There was no other poll before. By the way, it was very expensive, and I paid it all from my own pocket. There was no one else to support me, unfortunately. And but it was very interesting for me to find out what people in different countries think about capitalism. And what we did, first, we asked a couple of questions where we didn't use the word capitalism, because we knew that capitalism is a dirty word for a lot of people. It has a negative connotation. And so in the first questions, we only described what capitalism means without using the word. And here you see these were the statements. For example, the first is a pro-market statement here that you see here. I'm for an economic system in which the state sets the rules, but ideally does not interfere otherwise. This is a pro-market statement. The next statement is an anti-market statement. The state should set the prices for rent and food and should set minimum and maximum wages, otherwise the system is socially unfair. Or the next statement here, we need a lot more state intervention in the economy since the market fails time and again. And then we calculated the average percentage of pro-market statements, the average percentage of pro-state statements to come out as to coefficient. And the coefficient there for these questions in Serbia was almost near to 1. What does it mean? It means that that Serbia, in this way, if we speak market economy, is a kind of neutral, not anti-free market and not pro-free market. They balance each other out. If we don't use the word capitalism, so this is a good news for your country, the anti-capitalist attitude is not so big if we don't use the word, but it changes totally if we start to use the word capitalism. And for example, here we had another questions. If you hear the word capitalism, what do you associate? Like 82% greed, a positive thing, a wide range of goods, innovation positive, corruption, environmental degradation, and there it was, this was worse than the first set of questions. But the worst one was the next. We presented to all our respondents a total of 18 different statements, positive and negative statements about capitalism. And here you see all the prejudices. I spoke about one of them, you see here. Capitalism is dominated by the rich, they set the political agenda. I spoke about this. Leads to growing inequality, leads to monopolies, promotes selfishness and greed. I have also a chapter about this. Or is responsible for environmental destruction, climate change. I talked about this. Repeatedly leads to new economic and financial crisis. We spoke about this. And of course, there were also some positive statements, but they were not by far supported so much. Only 22% agreed may not be ideal, but is still better than other economic systems. Or you see here, only 10% agreed with the statement means economic freedom. And only 11% agreed has improved conditions for ordinary people in many countries. But I think it's stupid. There are so many examples. Look what happened in Poland. I've been there very often. Of course, capitalism improved the situation for people in Poland. Look what happened in Czech Republic. Look what happened all over the world. I had the fact there, so I spoke about Vietnam and countries like this. But only 11% of all our respondents here in Serbia agreed with the statement. In Germany, it was similar. It was only 15% in Germany who agreed with this statement, but 3 times more, 45% agreed with the statement, capitalism is responsible for hunger and poverty. So, and we did the same as we did for the other sets of questions. We calculated the average percentage of positive and negative statements, and so we came out to capitalism, anti-capitalism coefficient. But this is first the attitudes toward economic freedom. So these were the first 6 questions without using the word capitalism. And if you see here, Serbia is not so bad. It's neutral. It's 0.97, so it's almost 1. It means neutral. So you see there are some countries who are more pro-market economy, but there are much more countries that are anti-market economy than in Serbia, if you compare it. This is if you don't use the word capitalism. If you use it, it changes totally. Because then Serbia, it's similar here to Germany. You know, it's almost the same for Germany, Austria, Portugal, Serbia, Spain, and only here in some countries, as in Bosnia, for example, people are more anti-capitalist than they are here in Serbia. This was the last year the survey in Bosnia. And you see the most pro-capitalist countries are Poland, United States, South Korea, Japan, Czech Republic. And I think it's not so hard to understand. I mentioned it before, I was a lot of times in Poland, and Poland was one of the poorest countries in socialist times. Even they admired Yugoslavia at this time. This was like paradise for them if they compared it, Yugoslavia with Poland. And people were poorer than in Ukraine, and they had only half of GDP per capita from Czech Republic. So it was such a poor country. But since 25 years, Poland is Europe's growth champion, one of the world's growth champions. Standard of living increased so much if you go to Poland there. It's amazing, the difference now and then. And so people, they understand it. And so Poland is the most pro-capitalist country in our survey. And in Czech Republic, it's similar there. Even in Sweden, a lot of people think Sweden is a low socialist country. Wrong. This was a long time ago, 50 years ago, 1970. Sweden was, today Sweden is more capitalist than the United States, if you look at the index of economic freedom, for example. But people didn't forget in Sweden how bad this socialist time was in the 70s. And so today they are much more pro-capitalist. I was a little bit surprised about Argentina, that the image of capitalism is so positive in Argentina. But I've been in Argentina, and they have so much negative experience with its crazy Peronist policy there. You know, Argentina was one of the richest countries 100 years ago, as rich as the United States at this time, 100 years ago. And then they started with this crazy socialist Peronist policy, and it's 100 of years decrease. They have double inflation rate since 1945. Every year, only in the 90s, they had 10 years with lower inflation rate. Every year, double-digit inflation. And people are so desperate about the situation. And in Argentina, I saw the biggest libertarian movement I've seen all over the world. Even they have one who will run for president next year, Javier Milei there in Argentina. So I travel a lot I will travel to all of these countries, and sometimes you have to go to this country to understand the results of the survey. And here you can see the impact of using the word capitalism and how much the support for capitalism increases if we don't use the word. You see here in Serbia it was number 3, 64% it increased when we used the word. By the way, in the meantime we have done it in other countries, and it's funny that we have some countries where the support for capitalism, or the contrary, haven't increased if we used the word. This was in Vietnam, for example. In the moment when we used the word capitalism, the support increased for capitalism. You don't have it here on the slide. I got the results some weeks ago. And even in Nigeria, we had now the survey in Nigeria, support for capitalism was bigger when we used the word, because for them, capitalism means like Europe or United States, and almost no one supported the statement in Nigeria that capitalism is responsible for hunger and poverty. They know that it's not true. I'm curious. I've never been there, but I will go to Nigeria and Uganda, where we had the poll, to find out what people there think about capitalism, but we saw it here in the survey. And then there's another thing, this is the last one. During the Corona crisis, a lot of people spoke about conspiracy theories, and usually conspiracy theories are linked with right-wing thinking, and in a way it's correct. You have a lot of crazy right-wing people in the United States. Maybe you have heard about this QAnon, who are really stupid people, and they believe in conspiracy theories. But my hypothesis was that also anti-capitalism is a kind of conspiracy theory, and I wanted to prove it in a scientific way. And how did I do it? In addition to all these questions about capitalism, we presented to all our respondents these two statements that are typical for conspiracy theorists. The first statement is, in reality, politicians don't decide anything. They are puppets controlled by powerful forces in the background. And the other statement was, a lot of things in politics can only be properly understood if you know that there's a larger plan behind them. That's something that most people, however, do not know. These are typical convictions from conspiracy theorists. And then we wanted to find out whether more pro or anti-capitalists believe in this. And if you look at this graph, don't compare the countries. This is not really important. Compare the left dark bar with the right bright bar. And then you see, for example, here in Serbia, this is an example. These are the anti-capitalists. The coefficient for anti-capitalists, this is the coefficient for pro-capitalists. So you see, and it was in every country that anti-capitalists believe much more in conspiracy theory. So anti-capitalism is a kind of conspiracy theory. I was the first, I'm proud about this, to prove this hypothesis. And it's crystal clear. Even if it would have been only maybe 60% of the countries, it would be true. But it's every country, the only exception, there was a small difference, it was Albania. So, and in the United States, the difference between pro and anti-capitalists, even in the United States, there were more anti-capitalists who believe in conspiracy theories, but you see here the difference is not as big. These are the Trump supporters in the United States and QAnon people who say, yes, capitalism is a great thing, but I believe at the same time in this conspiracy theories. But even in the United States, anti-capitalists believe more in conspiracy theory than pro-capitalists. This is the first time that someone proved this hypothesis. So, this was summer book. Sorry, maybe it was a little bit longer than planned, but I think we have some more contributions. And so, first of all, thank you for listening to me. And I ask you one thing, please help to spread the message of the book. Don't buy only one, better buy 5 that you can give it. Don't give it to your anti-capitalist friends. It's very unlikely that they will read it. They don't touch books like this. They hate it. Give them another book about how bad is capitalism. They will be happy. They will not read this book. There are some exceptions. I know some people send me emails, and I read this book before. I was anti-capitalist. Now I believe capitalism is better. But I think there are exceptions. No. Give it to other people. Give it to your friends who are pro-market economy, pro-capitalism, to provide them with all the facts. And I can guarantee you, if you have any discussion with anti-capitalists, if you read this book, you will win every discussion as long as it's based on facts and not only based on ideology. So thank you for this. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rajner. So, for the beginning, when I was reading this book, the first thing that came to my mind while sifting through it is basically how it was written not by an economist for other economists, but written for a person who actually knows how to convey some of ideas that can to be very technical in a certain way that people who do not have economic education background and yet be able to understand what he's talking about. So I believe that's an added value how well the book is written in order to be able to do something like that. Another thing that I really liked is, of course, at the end of the book, which is the very long list of articles, books, and other media that if you're more interested in the topics that were raised in the book, that you can actually then use to search it to broaden your horizons. And of course, the third very interesting and very, very innovative part of this book is, of course, the public opinion polling that was done. To be honest, I have never heard, at least in the Serbian market, to have a book whose contribution is public opinion poll on a certain topic that was evaluated. So I think it is something completely new and never before seen in our book market. But let's start talking about the content. Basically, what you said at the beginning is, and you have been talking about it through your presentation also at the beginning of your book, is basically that people do not like the term capitalism. As you said, that probably we should use another different words when we talk about possible reforms and the ways how we would like our economic system and society to function. In your opinion, what could be the proper term instead of capitalism? And also a much wider question, what actually is capitalism? So, because when we talk about people who are on the other side of the fence, people who are not, who believe that capitalism is something bad, each of them has its own ideas what capitalism is, and they are not necessarily the same things that we believe capitalism is. So basically, for you, what is capitalism?
Yes, there are several questions. The first thing is, I heard it more often that people told me, please don't use the word, people don't like it. And of course, I knew it before that people don't like it. But one of the very interesting results in this poll is that even if we don't use the word, that only in 7 out of 34 countries people are pro-capitalism. So this is the bad news. It's not only about the word. Otherwise, it would be very easy to change the word and then everyone supports capitalism. But it's not the word. The difference between countries who support capitalism, if we use the word or if we don't use the word, it's only 1 or 2 countries difference. It's not a huge difference. I agree in Serbia, it's especially huge, the difference if we use the word and if we don't use the word. But I think it's not, and the key is not the question of a word, but in the key is to understand something, how economy works or does not work. And if someone asks me what is capitalism, for me, the most important thing in capitalism is entrepreneurship and consumers, because that entrepreneurs decide what will be produced and not politicians and government officials, and in the end, consumer decides and not politicians and bureaucrats. But what's important for me, there is no pure capitalist country nowhere in the world. And there is even no pure socialist country nowhere in the world. Even in socialist countries, you have some kinds of private property and market economy. Even in North Korea, not much, of course, but a little bit. And in Hungary you had it, and in Poland you had it. So there is no pure socialism could never work. So it would one of the first things that Lenin did after the Russian Revolution, he had to admit that it's not possible to abolish capitalism totally. He does this so-called new economic policy to reintroduce kind of capitalism, because they saw that it didn't work. And so everywhere in the world, this is as I see the world, we have mixed systems. I compare it with a test tube with 2 ingredients, market, state, capitalism, socialism. And then you see what happens if you add more state, what happens if you add more market. For example, I have another book, I hope it will be published also in Serbia, The Power of Capitalism. And I compare Venezuela and Chile. And I have the story about Venezuela. What did they do in the last 20 years? They add more state, and you know the result. It's a total disaster. I gave you the examples from China and Vietnam. What did they do? They add more market. It's great what happened there. And this is everywhere in the world. You can see it. If you add more market, it's better. If you add more state, situation. And it's not the absolute relationship between market and state that is important, but far more important is the relative change in the percentage of capitalism and in socialism. And if I had this interview today here on TV, and I told them, of course, not everything is perfect today in Serbia, but what you need would be more capitalism. This is the thing. This is the solution. You need very easy. More capitalism, for example, what does it mean for Serbia to more separate the state from the economy? Because this is the problem. If it is connected, as it is here or in Bosnia and in almost all countries, too much connected, this is the basis of corruption and of all these negative things. And so if you think there's too much corruption and too much influence of some rich people, my advice is do this, separate more the economy from the politics.
Also, your book is trying to tackle the 10 misconceptions that are widespread across the wider audiences regarding the capitalism or free market economy. In your opinion, what are the structural items, or better say preconceived ideas as the misconceptions? How are these preconceived ideas reiterated and renewed across the societies? Why are they so resilient and they still exist among us in such a great scope? Basically, what is the role of the educational system, of intellectuals in the media in that process?
Yes, if you look back 40 years ago, or even 30 years ago, I think most people in the world understood that socialism is bad and capitalism is the better system. Remember the end of the 80s and then the beginning of the 90s, we had this pro-market reforms in the 80s in the UK with Maggie Thatcher, in the United States with Ronald Reagan, in China with Deng Xiaoping. We had even pro-market reforms in Sweden and even in some countries as in Argentina or in a lot of countries. People saw that socialism does not work and capitalism is the better system. And then people forget about it over the decades. This is a huge problem. Even people sometimes forget why they became successful. I've told you I was in Poland a lot of times. And it's so successful what they did there, but even there, they forget it. Now they go back from this ruling peace party, nationalization, and stopped privatization, and more redistribution. Or look in Chile. Chile was by far the most successful country in Latin America. Much better than people in Argentina, Brazil, and the other countries. And why is that? Because they were the most pro-market-oriented country. And now they elected a socialist. And I know that this will make the situation worse in Chile. And this is, I think it happens always after time that people forget what happened. I think it's similar here in Serbia. The longer the distance is, the more people think that everything was great in Tito's time. And they should teach, of course, at school people what happened in socialism. But they don't do it. And this is, of course, the core problem is the intellectuals. In my other book, I hope it will be published here in Serbia, I have a chapter, this is maybe the most important contribution that I made, why intellectuals don't like capitalism. I could speak 1 hour only about this topic. This is not the time now to do it. But this is the core problem, that the majority of intellectuals, even it's their religion is anti-capitalism. And this is a core problem, because the roots of anti-capitalism is not the workers' movement. The root are the intellectuals, and that they hate capitalism. And so you see it in the media, you see it at universities, you see it at schools, that they tell you a lot about the evils of capitalism. And the problem is not only these intellectuals, the problem is that capitalism has not enough defenders, people like me, for example, entrepreneurs, they should do something to support capitalism. They should support think tanks like your think tanks, which much more money than they do. But I know all these libertarian think tanks all over the world, and they all have a big problem. This money, as you see here. I think some entrepreneurs should have maybe give me money to do this. I had to spend it from my own pockets because they don't do it and they don't take part in this discussion. And so I think the real problem is not the left-leaning intellectuals. The real problem is that we have not enough people who defend capitalism. So because it's this way, I started to do it and try to make my contribution in all over the world to speak about it. And hopefully, if I come here next time, you convinced a lot more people. And it starts always with the small movements like it is now, but it was with left-leaning ideas the same, and it will become more and more and more if we do something for this.
Thank you. I have another question. In Serbia, when somebody thinks about, let's say, a capitalist economy, a part of the United States, most people think about Germany. It's our biggest trade partner, the biggest economy in Europe. People tend to emigrate to Germany in high numbers, and they believe that German society is well regulated, etc. When we take a look at the public opinion polling, could you give us some nuances? What are the differences in perception of capitalism in Germany and the perception that is present of capitalism in Serbia?
It's 100% the same in Germany and in Serbia. You see the numbers, they're almost identical. In Germany, we have a lot of anti-capitalists. Even we have a bestseller now in Germany. Unfortunately, it's not my book, but the title of the book is The End of Capitalism. This is the bestseller. And the author, she tells us the following story. We have to forbid cars, forbid flying everywhere in the world, and there should be no new buildings, no new construction, because it's not possible because of environmental problems, climate change. We should redistribute all houses more equal to people, and even she said we should have, again, ration cards with not more than 2,500 calories a day, and she has exact ideas how much carbohydrates and protein and meat a little bit you can eat in the future. But this is bestseller in Germany, and you can see her in every talk show in German TV. She's very popular, and so we have a lot of crazy ideas there about capitalism. And this is crazy because our success was because we had in the 60s and so the policy from Ludwig Erhard, pro-market economy, and this was the reason of the success. Then there was a time at the end of the 90s, the beginning of 2000s, where Germany was like the sick man of Europe at this time because we had too much state, very high taxes, labor market regulation, and then we had a politician, Gerhard Schröder. Today I don't like him because he supports Putin so much, but at this time he's a social democrat. He made a good policy. He, even in spite of the fact that he's a social democrat, he reduced taxes from 53 to 42%. He lowered labor market regulation, and this was the reason why Germany was so successful in the last 20 years. It was not because of Angela Merkel, it was in spite of Angela Merkel that Germany was so successful. But now we go more and more in the direction of a planned economy in Germany with the energy. There was an article in Wall Street Journal 3 years ago. The headline was the dumbest energy policy in the world, and this was about Germany. And it's true, I mentioned it before. Phase out nuclear power plants. If you want to do something against climate change, you need more nuclear power plants, not to phase out them, than to phase out coal power plants. They want to do everything with windmills and with solar energy, what is not possible in a country as Germany. And then they made us dependent on Russian gas, and this also didn't work. And so we have so many problems. Of course, if a country is very strong as Germany was, it happens not from one day to the next. You can do a lot of crazy things. But sooner or later, it's like if you have a great body, for example, you can eat for the next few weeks a lot of chocolate and pizza every evening and you will not become fat. But of course, if you go on doing this for months and for years, you will become fat. And then what happens? Maybe this is a good example. Maybe then you become very fat, 150 kilo. And then you recognize, okay, I should reduce, stop eating chocolate, stop eating pizza, all this stuff. And then you make diet, then you have a great body again. And then after 2 or 3 years, people think, okay, I have a great body. Why shouldn't I eat a chocolate? Then they eat a chocolate. What happens? Nothing bad happens next day. It's not they wake up next day that they are fat. Okay, I can go on. What happens 1 month later? Maybe they have 1 kilo more. It's not a big, huge difference whether you have 80 or 81 kilo. And this is what happens in a lot of countries. They forget why they became successful because they stopped eating pizza, stopped eating chocolate. And this way they forget it, why they became successful. And they start to do again all the things. And this is what happened in Germany, so I'm very pessimistic about the things. We have now a government in Germany with 2 very left parties, and then another party, I'm a member of the Liberal Party in Germany, but we can only avoid the worst thing that happens. But if they could do what they want to do, they want everything like extreme increase taxes and wealth tax and all this stuff. And so for Germany, I'm not optimistic in this moment.
So let's not be too optimistic for the future of Europe. Thank you, Rajner. I of course have dozens of other questions to pose you, but I would like to ask for the audience to take the floor if they have something that is interesting. Thank you. Just please shout out or
take a mic. I think better ideas. Yeah. Take a microphone.
Maybe you could use this microphone. Just present yourself.
Maybe I'll stand there. Then it's easier for me to see you.
Just turn it on.
I think now it should be, yeah.
Okay. Maybe you could give her yours, so it's easier.
I think it's working. No? Yeah? Do you hear me? Yeah. Okay. My name is Ana Morokvažić, and it so happens that I'm a nomad. So I've lived in, I'm born and bred in Belgrade, but I've studied in the States, in Norway, in Germany, in Berlin, and I've worked in Greece. And I have many takeaways from your wonderful lecture or presentation or promotion of your book or whatever you want to call it or label it. But I want you to, since I didn't participate in your wonderful poll, I would like you to take some takeaways from a Serbian, from somebody who came to listen to your lecture. And I was just sitting here, and it literally just, while I was listening to you, I was going through all these different kinds of, like, no, all capitalisms are not created equal. That's just something I thought about. So we are talking about different definitions, and I would call the Scandinavian type of capitalism compassionate capitalism. And then I would call Serbian, whatever we have here, confused capitalism. Greece is communist capitalism. Trust me, I've been there for 2 years prior to just before the corona broke out. And what was the third one? The fourth one is Germany, of course, and I guess that's classic capitalism. So yeah, that would be it. Thank you.
Yeah,
I don't have a question, but I just thought I would give you some things to think about. Yeah.
Yes, but I think if you look in the index of economic freedom, it's not perfect, but if you look there, I think you see which countries are more or less capitalist, and I think Serbia is only on rank number 35 from 45 European countries, so it's not really good. On the contrary, and Sweden, for example, is much better. So some people have also wrong ideas about Sweden. I mentioned it before. They think it's a kind of social. Of course, it's true they have high income taxes there in Sweden. This is true, but for example, they have no inheritance tax. They have no wealth tax. They abolished it. They have fewer labor market regulations. I think that as you have here, and if you look at the index of economic freedom, they are even more economically free than the UK or the United States. So, but in Serbia, I think there are a few good things like the taxes. I think it's much better than we have in Germany. For example, I paid for most of my time as an entrepreneur 48% taxes here. I don't think that here's someone who has to pay 48% taxes, so half of this is, but there are a lot of other problems here. I think you know better than me, but I think labor market regulation and especially the rule of law, what is a very important thing for capitalism. I think this is, and so for example, for me, Russia is not capitalism. So it's like kleptocracy. They started in the beginning of maybe 2000, 2001, 2002, they started to go in a good direction to capitalism, but then Putin started like in 2003 to expropriate the very richest people there. In reality, it was expropriation, and this is a good lesson to learn from history. It always began in Russia with the fight against private property. It was 1917, they expropriated them, and it was 2003. It was the same. It took the richest one, took it away, their property, and then they did it with a lot of others. And so I think people, they call it capitalism, and I call it kleptocracy. And I don't know enough about Serbia, but maybe there are some things in common even here.
Okay. You want to add something? Or?
Well, thank you for the answer. I think I need to not comment on what we are going through here, because it's a very, very delicate topic, and as I told you, I think we are confused. We don't know what to label, what we are, like if you'd asked anybody around here what kind of system, political, governmental, whatever you want to call it, we are living in, I don't think you would get a homonymous answer. You would get very heterogeneous, everybody would say something different. What
yes.
they perceive Serbia is like today, whereas in XU, in Yugoslavia, you would have a very homogenic kind of reply. So yeah, I was just wondering, you mentioned that you sponsored your own market research in different
yes.
countries. So did you use, in different countries, you used the local market research and agencies, or?
Yes. It was Ipsos Mori. This is one of the leading polling institutes in the world. I did it in almost all countries. There were a few countries where they couldn't do it, like I think in Nepal and Uganda, and also in Vietnam we did it with different, but in almost all countries we did it with Ipsos Mori. This is one of the leading companies, and so it's so expensive. It was around 40,000 euros in each country, and so if you multiply this with 34, you can see that it cost me a lot of money, and this is the reason I would like to do it in 100 countries maybe, and not only in more countries, but I would do it like in 3 years again. But I will not do it because I have a lot of money, but I don't want to write my next book with how to become poor with doing scientific research and writing books or something like this.
Hello, good evening. Dusan Dinic is the name. Thank you for your wonderful presentation. I'm working for Friedrich Naumann Foundation here, so we are also ideologically close. But my question is very simple. Why, in your opinion, is the capitalism not so sexy in the mind of the people? Because it's obvious, I think, and perhaps advanced question: what could we do to make him sexy? In which direction should we talk? Is it to make him more emotional or more rational?
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you.
Of course, it's the most important question. Thank you for this. Yes, I think the first thing is we should learn from the anti-capitalists, we should learn from left-leaning people. Because what do you do in business if you see one company succeeds, is successful, the others not? We call it best practice in business. And we see the left people are successful, the anti-capitalists are successful, pro-capitalists are not. So we should learn something from them. We should analyze organizations like Greenpeace, for example. They are successful in the things, how they do it. They are much better in telling stories, for example, emotional stories. I know a lot of these libertarian think tanks in the world, and they are important, but sometimes they do a bad job. For example, like someone standing there, here I have a Mises quote, a Hayek quote, and here I have this pricing theory, and very abstract. And of course, for young people, this is not really easy to have enthusiasm for this, and they don't talk about topics like poverty. We should speak more like topics like poverty and how much poverty was reduced by capitalism, as I did it. And I think it's not only important to have good ideas, but it's much more important to sell it. It's worth nothing if you can't sell it. I'm a big fan of Arnold Schwarzenegger. I read his autobiography, and he wrote, whatever you do, whether it's in sports, whether it's in politics or in business, if you can't sell it, it's worth nothing. And this is what we have to understand. Because I think it's incredible that a bad system that caused 100 million dead people in the last 100 years had the image of human socialism, good, and a great system as capitalism that reduced poverty like no other system in the world before had the image of inhuman system. I think this is, they should really be genius in public relation, these people, and we should definitely analyze how they do it and learn something from them, because the way we do it is not very successful, and you have to understand more about public relations. So maybe I'm a little bit a combination. On the one hand, I'm a scientist, this is true, but on the other hand, I was an entrepreneur. I was the owner and founder of the leading public relation company in Germany for real estate industry. And so I think always not only in science on the one hand, but I think in public relation. And this is the reason. For example, most of the people, they would do it this way. They write a book, and then, okay, everything's done, everything's finished. The book is there, so job done. No, for me, no. Now it begins. I come here, give this interview with media, and come here, have lectures and so on. This is only, to write a book is only the first thing. Then the most important thing starts. Do public relation for this, and I do it all over the world. And I think this is the problem with a lot of libertarians, and even I can talk so much about it, I don't want to bore you, but I tell you one example. Maybe you know Cato Institute. This is one of the most prestigious libertarian institutes in the United States, and they published a book from me. And then we spoke about I wanted to have royalties, and I said, okay, I want to have this. No, we don't give royalties, we give you a fixed sum like $5,000. And I don't need the $5,000, keep it, I want royalties. And then, no, we don't do it. Then they told me, I don't understand, why do you not accept it? It's much more if we give you this fixed sum. Yes, it's much more if you don't sell the book. And later I saw that they didn't try to sell. They did no public relations. They did nothing for this. Why? Because they get their money from the donators, and in the end of the year they show them, oh, we published 20 books, donators are happy, they sold none of these books. And so this is like, and this is, you know, for me a little bit paradox. On the one hand, to speak about how important is profit motive, how important free market, and then to act like socialists. Even some publisher in the United States from, you know, and UK from libertarian, they thought, we will publish the book, but we will have it from free on the internet for everything. I don't want it. It's a socialist idea. I work for this, and then you have to get freedom. People should pay for the book. And I like a publisher. I hope you will like to make money with the book. I like people who want to make money, because in the moment when you want to make money with a book, you think about marketing and how to sell it. So I think there's something okay with the libertarian movement, but there's a lot of things wrong. And if you asked how to make it more sexy, I tell you another thing. I was in Argentina, and I told you about this. This is the strongest libertarian movement that I saw all over the world in Argentina right now. And of course, they have a leader there, or some of them, who are very, like Argentina, speak very, a little bit like populist, but with pro-market. The leader there is a professor for Austrian economy, but then I saw that he behaves like a rock star there, and they understand much more about marketing. And I met the vice president from this party, and she's one of the prettiest women in Argentina. She's a photo model and actress, and when I had dinner with her, people came and want to have, you know, picture and autogram, and so they understood something about how to make capitalism more sexy in a way. And sometimes I saw these libertarian peoples in some countries with their very boring lectures and so, from people who were not able really to speak, to convince people. So, sorry that I spoke so long, but of course it's the most important question. To sum up, we have to learn much more about marketing, public relation, and then, most important thing, learn from the successful, learn from anti-capitalists, learn from left-wing people. They know how to sell it, their ideology.
Somebody else?
Well, if this is it, I would like to thank our dear guest, Mr. Citelman, for coming all the way from Germany to Serbia to talk to us about his book that has just been published here. Also, I would like to ask you if this event has made you think about these topics more, and if you would like to get yourself a copy of the book. In a corner, you can buy this book with 30% discount, more or less. I'm not really good at numbers this late in the evening. So it is a good opportunity to get it either for you or as a present for somebody else.
I think it's a discount there. Is this correct? Or
over 30% discount, yeah. So
how much is it?
More than 30% of the discount. The price of the book will be 1,500 dinars, if I'm not mistaken.
So I would recommend you to buy at least 3, but better 5 or 10. Then, yeah, it's true, to give it to other people help. It starts like this. I will never get rich with this book because I told you about my expenses. I will never get it back. This is not the reason I tell you. Sometimes, yes, this is crazy. On Facebook, of course, I make sometimes a little bit, propaganda for my books. And then there are some stupid people there, he wants to sell his book? Yes, of course. I'm not crazy. Why do I write books? To sell it, but not to become rich, but to convince people. This is the reason. So, and I know a lot of things where you can make much more money than writing books. So, but it's very important for me to spread the idea to people. And so, I mean, it's serious. Think about it. If you get this discount, buy 3, 4, 5, 10 books, give it to other people. As I mentioned, maybe not for anti-capitalists, they will not read it, but maybe you know some people who are interested in this and they share some, but they need the arguments, and then you can give it to them and tell them, okay, I give it to you, but please buy 5 more to give it to others. And then if you do it this way, I think then the publisher hopefully will also be happy, and then we can have a lot of other books. Pardon? Yes. Yes. Pardon? Yes, this is a, yes, I have a lot of, this is, I think, yes, this is book number 26 now, and there are a lot of other books so to publish here in Serbia. So, thank you. Yes, let's do it. I will go there and sign some books, and again, thank you for inviting me, and I will stay here hopefully for 2 more days, hopefully to meet some people and interviews, because this is the last thing to mention. I come sometimes to speak, but today I listened and I learned from you a lot, and I will listen much more, because one of my next book, the title will be Liberty Road Trip. It's next year, and I told you last year 17 countries, this year 30 countries, and after visiting every country, I write some pages about market economy and the countries and the people, this Liberty Road Trip, and I like to come back here in Serbia maybe when it's summer. I think even if it's summer, it's, of course, I saw it's a very nice country here, and of course, like every country, it's better in summer than in winter. So let's sign now some books. Do me a favor, if I sign a book for you, please show me how to write your name, or maybe you can write it on a sheet of paper, then it's easier for me to sign it for you. Thank you for inviting me. Thank you.
Thank you. Rajner, hvala svima.
Thank you.